good afternoon, depending on where you're at. I got to get used to not being on East Coast time. I apologize. It's like messed me up all week. Like my whole schedule's like rocked. I feel like Dan. But yeah, appreciate everybody jumping on. Was pumped to get today's session on the books. I met Dan through Matt Jastrzemski like maybe like March of this year. Matt DM'd me like a whole shitload of people and was like, you should meet all of these people, but Dan in particular is like very impressive. Dan works for a company called Tactics in Philadelphia. They graciously let us use their awesome space for Event Start Philadelphia chapter, which is awesome. But Dan bootstrapped and sold a company called MainlineDelivery.com back in the day. I say back in the day, he's not that old.
A long time ago.
Yeah, but bootstrapped the whole thing has a cool story and a lot of learning. So I always think it's cool to get somebody to come on here and just riff who's like built and sold a company that size and done it the hard way from scratch. So Dan, I'm going to let people into the waiting room as they kind of come in here. But I'm going to throw things over to you. Welcome to kick it off and take it from here. I'll monitor the
Sure.
chat too if anybody asks you something.
Oh yeah. I'm not gonna watch the chat. I can't multitask like that. Um, it's cool to see people rolling in. I guess it's fun to tell my story. I don't do it that often, so it might be a little disjointed, and it's probably similar to all of yours. Not linear, and through multiple iterations. And I think as I talk about it, other things will probably pop in my mind, and I'll probably back up, and so the timeline might get funky here. Um, but to sort of put it in perspective, I guess, and I'm just going to kind of talk and then probably stop talking. I don't have like a good motivational presentation about all of this. So glean from it what you will. Some of this may be more applicable to some of you than others, depending on what kind of businesses you're running and where you're located. So take from what you will, and then I'll tell you a little bit about what I'm doing now. And I've been doing some post selling the company, which includes bootstrapping a new company. So that's kind of a fun thing to talk about, among other things. So I'm from outside of Philadelphia, from the Mainline. If you're not familiar with Philadelphia, it's like the first western suburb outside of Philadelphia. I went to Lower Merion High School. The Mainline is an area that has like a lot of really high-end restaurants and a lot of like fairly wealthy people, and it's kind of adjacent right next to Philadelphia. And grew up, went to Ritterman High School, went to Penn State, political science major. Plan was to go to law school, which I'll get back to that in their circuitous story. But at Penn State, there was a company called Line Menus, and to give you like a time reference, I was at Penn State from 2004 to 2008, and to even like probably put a pin in it for you, the iPhone came out in 2007, right? So this is like a year post smartphones like becoming a thing. Everybody when I graduated from college had a BlackBerry. People were like just getting iPhones like for the first time, right? So um, if you think about the number of packages that you received in that time period from 2004 to 2008 from things that you received online, for me it was zero, right? So this was a time that you weren't like, it's a funny thing to think about, but you weren't like using the internet for real life services. At least I wasn't, right? The internet was a place for like research and email and looking things up and talking to people and things like that. But it wasn't like a thing that you did something in the internet and then something happened like in the real world. So there was a company called Line Menus, and what they did was they operated a portal much like Grubhub. So you could order online. They had a bunch of restaurants. Restaurants had their own delivery drivers. They were like your average pizza shops, but everybody sort of just at Penn State became the thing. If you were going to order food, you just ordered it from Line Menus. Those guys ended up founding a bunch of other companies in and around Philadelphia. I became friends with them in like later years, but I just used that service. Came home for winter break my senior year and was talking to my best friend from high school who went to Wash U. He was an electrical engineer, chemical engineer, doesn't matter. They had a company there called 569 Dine, which was like the opposite of Line Menus, right? You called them, and then they called the restaurant to place your order, and then they sent a driver. So they were doing like a lot of what we ended up doing, but like hadn't layered on the website yet. It was still just like a call-in service with like menus that you had. Dave, nice. We talk about those Line Menus guys. That's funny. I'm still in touch with Justin somewhat regularly. That's funny. Anyway, so that was like to give you a time. So we're home for winter break. We were doing what we were doing in college, home from winter break, and we were saying like, man, it would be awesome if we could just like order Wawa delivery, right? Like we've got this company line menus that we use at Penn State. Like, man, if Wawa was on that, that'd be great. It's like, oh, we've got this thing like 569 Dine, and we're just like, well, I don't understand why this isn't all like one thing. Why isn't there just like a website that you can order from, they deliver for all the restaurants, and there just wasn't, and it sounds ridiculous to say it now, but it just didn't exist. And we kind of knew that there were some companies. There's a company called Dining In that had been doing it forever in Philadelphia. It was like takeout taxi and carry out cab, and everyone had like one of these old school franchises that printed out giant menu books. Like, right, again, like, and I'm of the firm belief that ideas are cheap and nothing is truly novel, right? For the most part, right? Like, it's probably unlikely that anybody on this call is working on something that doesn't already exist in some form or another, right? We're like all building a better mousetrap. We're all like whatever you want to call it, right? So, there's nothing interesting about this. We just saw two other companies and some white space where we lived, and we started calling Wawa, and it turned out very quickly that Wawa just like did not want to talk to two like 21-year-olds who hadn't even graduated from college yet. That became very apparent very quickly. And we never, in the 8 years of operating mainline delivery, ever even really talked to Wawa in a meaningful way. Today, Wawa is on all of those services, so fuck those guys, but whatever. Anyway, we started like taking this idea and just being like, this is a pretty good idea. It doesn't exist here. It doesn't seem that hard to do. It doesn't seem that capital intensive. Why don't we just build a website and start going to restaurants? So while we were in our senior year of college, we put together $20,000. We started the company with an initial cash injection of $20,000. We never put an additional dime into it in terms of like cash. So, that was kind of and this was, again, to date ourselves in a time and place. That $20,000, 16,000 of it was spent on a website. 2,000 of it was spent on like four $500 GPS units that you had to stick into cars, right? Like that was, again, this was like, there's no phones happening at this time. It's just email and like whatever. So scramble together $20,000, pay a company to build a website. That website ended up like having all of our customers' credit cards hacked. It was like a terrible mistake building that company, that website, but they were the only ones who would build it for what we could afford to pay. So we did it and it worked and it was fine at the end of the day, I guess. That website, we thought it was going to take 6 months to build, that we'd be able to open like end of that summer of 2008. Obviously, if you've ever built a website, like that's crazy talk, and whatever date you put on it, you can just like add 6 months to that. So we tried to launch in December of that year. The whole thing broke. And we shut down and then reopened a month later with a working website. So we were like 6 or 7 months late, which I don't think is that bad when you're building out an internet product. But anyway, we had hired another company to do it. I'm not a technical guy. I'm a political science major. I was going to go to law school. And this sell to like my parents was essentially like, I'm going to live at home. It's going to be super cheap. And if I have to go to law school in 2 years, so be it. And whatever. So we started. We signed 4 restaurants and we opened. My friend had a little bit of money saved up, rented an apartment in Ballackinwood. I don't know if any of you are familiar with it. It's on Highland Road. I can drive you by it one day if you'd like to see where it all started. It just looks like a house. But we had an apartment in there, and that was essentially our first office. And we signed 4 restaurants and just launched. And we were doing everything with the two of us. And one of my favorite things about a company like Mainline Delivery, and it's similar to the company that I'm starting now, is our worst case scenario just wasn't that bad, right? Like, we had started this company with $20,000. We didn't really need additional money to run it. And in fact, had you offered it to me, I wouldn't have known how to spend it, right? Because we had the product. All that we really needed at that point was restaurants and customers. And that didn't really require money. I'm not good at marketing, and I've never been good at marketing, and I don't know how to do marketing. And if any of us could be really good at marketing, we'd probably be, further along than where we are, myself included, right? So we didn't really know how to spend the money. So we spent that time selling restaurants and trying to gain customers. The way that we gained customers at the end of the day was the idea had to marinate, consumer education. And also, we were going into restaurants and selling them on us, but the reality was that we weren't like doing any business. So we weren't bringing them a whole lot. But they didn't know that, and they didn't need to know that. All that they knew was that we were operating, and these were the restaurants that we had on the platform. So we started going to our restaurant partners and saying, hey, like, can we put a sign up? Can we give out marketing materials? Can we give out coupons, like, with your checks that you're giving out? Like, it's just more business for you, ideally. I don't know if I believe that or not, and that's a whole nother conversation. But like, it started with getting a lot of free marketing from our restaurant partners. And if you've ever driven by Saffron on Montgomery Avenue in Ballackinwood, for years, they had this like absurd giant like chicken that said Mainline Delivery on it. And like, I don't even know why it was a chicken, but it was there forever. And if you drove down Montgomery Avenue in Ballard Kinwood, which thousands of people do a day, you like couldn't miss this ridiculous sign. And I'm not so sure that that's advertising you could pay for if you had the money, right? That was just a restaurant owner who was local and liked us and let us do it. So we're sort of grinding along. Again, this is 2008 to 2010. It was going fair, I would say, right? I was like running out of time where I could like justify continuing to do this. So I took the LSAT and I went to law school. So this is where the story starts to veer. This is 2010. We were doing well enough that like it was making some money, but I didn't see, certainly, sure shit didn't see where the industry would go now, but I didn't even necessarily see it as a big enough mom and pop style business to ever pay my own bills. So I took the LSAT, I went to law school. I started at Temple part-time. I was there from 2010 to 2014. We were doing almost all of our business after 5 o'clock at night. You know, if you're familiar with the main line, it's not a big office market. There's not a ton of lunch business. We were doing like 75+% of our business after 4 p.m. So I would take classes at law school during the day. Then I'd go sit in the chair and dispatch drivers at night. We had hired a bunch of drivers. At that time, it finally made sense to start hiring our first full-time employee. I was like kind of pot committed to law school at that point. So I finished law school. Partner was running the company, and we had a guy who would sit in the chair and actually do the dispatching every day. And I think that that was like, you know, second piece of, you know, business advice that I guess I'll run into in this story is like, our business didn't really start to proliferate until we literally got ourselves out of the dispatcher's chair, right? Like at first, me and my partner were doing every delivery. We're living in an apartment. One order would come in, we'd be like making dinner, and we'd rock, paper, scissors, shoot, and whoever lost had to go take the delivery, right? Because we had nobody. It was just the two of us. And then eventually one night we got like 3 orders, and we're like, oh shit, we can't do this anymore. So we hired a delivery driver, and I actually work for that guy's father now, but another long end around story in this timeline. So hired our first driver until we had enough drivers that it made sense to hire a guy to dispatch the drivers. And I don't think the company really took off until like we could just get ourselves out of the office for the day and go sign a bunch of new restaurants, right? Because like it's really hard to do that when an order comes in and your whole day stops and you have to like go change what you're doing and take your task away from growing the business to do the thing that your business does, right? So like at some point your business has to grow from I'm really good at doing this thing, I'm going to make a business out of it, to I'm actually going to become a business person, let other people who are good at this thing do the thing. And this is kind of a digression, but I met a guy who was, he's like a franchise broker, but it was just a fascinating conversation because he said a lot of his people, they're like corporate America people in management who are sick of going to a corporate job and want to own a business. And he kind of said like, does it matter that you're passionate about the thing? Like, yeah, but like a dog grooming franchise doesn't need really good dog groomers, right? You can find really good dog groomers. What it needs is somebody who's really good at customer service, cares about the business, is going to be there every day and grind on it, right? And try to grow the business so that they can then hire more dog groomers and open another franchise, right? You don't need to be the best dog groomer. I don't care about food delivery. It was like a hole in the market that we saw that we thought we could enter cheaply, and it turned out that it worked out well. Could it have been bigger? Of course. Like, look at what DoorDash is. They took over the world. We had a mom and pop version of this, but that's too much of a digression. So 2014, I graduated from law school. It took me 4 years because I was part-time running the business at night. My business partner was sick of food delivery. I hadn't been running it, so I went back and I ran it basically from May 2014. I passed the bar in June, so call it June 2014, and ran it until we sold the company at the end of 2016. So that was like another 2.5-year-ish run of where I was essentially in charge, and he had left to start developing video games. His company's called Cleaversoft. His name is Rich Siegel. He's like my best friend in the world still, which was part of the impetus for selling the company, was that we felt like we could just keep being friends and it wouldn't destroy us like everyone told us that it would. But check it out, cleaversoft.com. He makes like beautiful art and beautiful video games. So I come back in 2014. That's kind of when we looked up and we said, holy shit, this company's way bigger than we thought it was going to be, right? That's when I realized that like, oh, this could actually pay me like as much money as I could go make as a lawyer, except I might not hate my life every day. And maybe we should turn our attention and really try to grow this thing. And that is when we started for the first time kind of trying to find investors. This is like 2015, 2016, probably late 2015. And if you look up stories about the food delivery world in 2015, 2016, what you'll see are stories like SoftBank raises a billion, DoorDash raises $1 billion from SoftBank, right? And this was all when we started looking at other markets that were similar to the main line, but not yet saturated with delivery companies. So think like Margate and Ventnor over the summer. We did that for a summer. We ran a plane across the sky, which was awesome. I don't know if anyone saw it, but I saw it. And we tried to open in Chappaqua, New York. We tried to open in Princeton, New Jersey. Think, like wealthy kind of ish suburbs that thought were similarly situated to the main line. We ended up getting Chappaqua off the ground, and that's sort of like,
Looks like Dan froze there. Dan, you froze there for a second. Right
oh
after
no,
Aqua.
I'm on good internet. What's going on? Am I back?
You're back now.
Oh, I'm
Yep.
back.
But it
Okay,
was
well,
literally right after you said you got Chappaqua off the ground.
got Chappaqua off the ground. We started running that. We were trying to raise money. And like the feedback that we were getting from people was just like, we're too late, right? Like there's too much money in the space now. Like this is a great, essentially like the advice that I kind of now give to a lot of people who are bootstrapping, where it's like, you're running a really profitable business. Why would you want to fuck it up by taking on a big investment, right? And like, I guess if you're building a company that requires a lot of capital from the start or by design, which by the way, DoorDash did, right? DoorDash's model was essentially, we're going to take over the world or we're going to fold, right? Like those were their options. They raised $1 billion. They spent 500 million of it on marketing, lit it on fire in an attempt to cut their costs to the bone or cut their pricing to the bone to customers, essentially, deliver for restaurants without even having contracts. They were just buying the food at cost, right? Because they didn't care. Their goal was world domination, and then they got there, and then they figured out how to, well, they haven't yet, they have a negative PE, but are trying to now figure out how to turn the screws to make it profitable. We never built our company that way. We couldn't afford to. We built our company so that it essentially had to be making money from day one. It couldn't be operating at a loss once we put our initial dollars in, right? For every delivery that we did, we were making money. There's some bumps in that story also. Our pricing was way too low when we started. We ended up like quadrupling it by the time we were done. There were things along the way that obviously we had to pivot and change, but we never built the company from the start to take on a large investment. And I just didn't have the background in it. My partner didn't have the background in it. And in retrospect, like, sure, we could have been 4 years earlier to the party, but I don't know if the world was ready for it that yet, so who knows. Anyway, this is now mid-2016. We had started getting calls from our restaurants that Caviar was calling them, trying to get them to sign contracts with them. We had exclusive relationships with all of our restaurants, and we were doing so much business for a lot of them that they just weren't going to risk that. But they told us, because we had good relationships with them, that, hey, we're getting calls from this company, Caviar. I'll back up the story again. I met my wife through a guy at college at Penn State. That same guy was at a party in mid-2016 with this woman, Stephanie, who happened to be the general manager of Caviar Philadelphia. And they were at a party, and this woman just said to him, we're trying to expand to the main line, but this company, Mainline Delivery, is in our way. And he basically said, I know that guy, and put us in touch. And that's how Caviar was owned by Square at the time, the credit card processing company. That's a whole nother long conversation about that. But we ended up talking to Square, and they ended up buying our company. I think we closed December 4th of 2016. And I have lots of regrets and thoughts. And at the end of the day, not taking on an investment is not one of my regrets, because by the time that we were ready, had we taken on that investment, we couldn't have sold the company. Like the only reason that we were able to take the amount that they were offering us was because I owned half of it. And at the end of the day, like you think about food delivery as like a tech company, and we thought about ourselves as a tech company, but like you're not. You're providing like a very real world service at the end of the day that has limitations on how fast you can grow realistically, right? Like you can't just, if you're making a SaaS product, you can sell it to 100 or 1,000 people at the same time, and your cost, obviously there's incremental costs there, but it's not to go from 0 to 1 million deliveries in a day, right? You have to build real infrastructure, and that takes time. So at the end of the day, was the company worth as much as I thought it was? No, and I was convinced about their valuation, but I owned half of it. So we were able to kind of come to a number that worked and made sense, and we sold in December 2016. My partner sailed off into the sunset. to make video games, not to go do nothing, because it wasn't like that. But he's doing that now, and he's been pretty successful at it, and sold a game to Apple, and done well. And I went and I worked for Square for 2 years and became like a corporate tech employee, which was fun because I was mostly remote and didn't have to go to their office all the time, which was in San Francisco. Worked for them for 2 years, and I was just sick of food delivery. This is 2018. And working with restaurant owners is exhausting. One of my other business lessons that's come out of my experience is never own a restaurant. You just lose Friday, Saturday, and Sunday nights. So like, what are you even hoping for? It works out well, then you never have a weekend again. Like, I don't know why that's a good outcome for anyone. But my other thing is, you can open a successful restaurant, it's doable, but a lot of deeply unqualified people open restaurants. And it kind of goes back to my franchise thing that I was saying before, where like the fact that you make good food, I actually think it makes it less likely that you can make money making good food. And if you look around at successful restaurant owners, most of them either aren't chefs, or if they are a chef, they have a partner who's not a chef, right? Because you need somebody to be looking at the numbers of these things and whatever, it's a whole digression. So I was sick of working with restaurant owners. I gave Square 6 months notice, started figuring out what I wanted to do, had a law degree, knew I didn't want to practice law. This is when I got looped back around to Glenn Blumenfeld, who owns Tactics, where I work now. Again, his son was the first driver that we ever hired out of like, I think we had 200 drivers on staff when we sold the company, and I think we had probably 400 move throughout the system over the years, of the 8 years. We do commercial real estate brokerage. I don't necessarily need to talk about that. It's not that relevant unless any of you need real estate. We can talk about it, but he kind of said we're mostly former lawyers. You get to kind of be a little entrepreneurial in it, and I really like it. The thing that I think is relevant to round out the story, and I don't usually ramble for 25 minutes straight, so I'm sorry about that. But my wife and I, when COVID hit, saw kind of another opportunity to start what I consider to be kind of like a similar business. My wife was a teacher forever, 2nd and 3rd grade, and I think that there was a clear gap between, similar to restaurant owners, people who want to teach and know how to teach and are good at teaching, and knowing how to make money teaching, or tutoring in this case. So I kind of convinced her when COVID hit. I've been trying for a while, but I saw COVID as the opportunity to start matching her network of teachers up with parents that we find out in the market who are looking for private tutoring, right? And the pitch to teachers is they just want to know where to go, who to teach, and how much they'll get paid. They don't want to find clients. They don't want to talk about money. So if we can be the go-between and be the marketplace for these tutors, there's a real opportunity here. And it's a similar business. I think we're up to $150 a month in fixed costs. It's like a QuickBooks account, a Google account, and then we do some Facebook marketing. But like the entire company is essentially sitting on Facebook and responding to people and then making some money incrementally and growing it slowly. And it's the kind of company that it can't really lose money. It just can't. I mean, it's worst case scenario, it goes to 0 clients and you have like $150 a month of fixed costs, right? But it won't go to 0 clients. And so that's been like a fun thing to build with my wife. I kind of do like 2 to 4 hours a week of work in QuickBooks for her to help her grow that, but that's mostly her thing. But I just love these sort of like low cost opportunity businesses that you can grow without a lot of money. And even again, with that business, if you offered me $100,000 to grow it, I don't have a good, reliable way to spend $100,000 to grow that business. Like, I guess that I could hire a salesperson or a marketing person, but I'm not so sure that I'd ever get that return back, right? Like, the right way to grow that business might just be to grind it out for 3 to 5 years and look up one day and all of a sudden, like, holy shit, look what I've built. And I just like love that kind of business where the worst case scenario is just, we tried it, right? And I'm no worse off than that. So that's 25 minutes of me talking. Oh, last thing I'll say, and I'm sorry, I said this would happen. Last piece of unsolicited business advice is if people are willing to pay for your product and you're supply constrained, you need to raise your prices and not be shy about it. And people don't do that. And for us, we started at a $3.99 delivery fee, went to $4.99, no one said a word. Went to $5.99, no one said a word. Went to $6.99, no one said a word. And we ended it at $6.99. But we ultimately put on like a service charge that we basically told our restaurants, we need to jack your percentages to 30%, or we're putting a service charge on every order. And nobody wanted us to jack their prices, so we did the service charge, and that turned our company from a small business to seriously profitable in a day, like in one day. because again, we just added this thing on and kind of put a notice on the website that it was happening. And a couple people called and were pissed off and said they would never order again, and maybe they didn't. But you know, if you double your costs and lose half of your clients, you're going to make the same amount of money for half the work. Like that math like doesn't always work, right? Because you might lose more than your half your clients if you double your cost. But like there's a number in there that you can raise your costs where you probably won't lose any meaningful amount of clients. You'll just make more money. And I think a lot of people are, well, right, that's why I said not to. Yeah, I mean, the double and half is just a good way to make the math make sense to people. But like, could you raise your prices 10% and lose no clients? Probably, if your product is good enough. And that's hard to do, but everyone has to do it at some point, or else you're just going to stay stagnant, or all your time's going to get sucked up by the same, making the same amount of money. So I'm happy to like discuss or answer questions. I'm sorry, again, I don't talk for a half hour straight with no presentation all that often. So I hope that was like a helpful story. Everybody told me that when we started the company, this would destroy my relationship with my best friend, and it might have, had I not gone off in one direction and then come back and he not gone off in another direction. But I think that for me, like there was never a situation where I didn't have another person to call to talk about it. And I think if you're building a company yourself, that can be kind of a lonely thing. Even now, it's like my wife and I have business conversations, which don't always go well, but it's a fun thing to talk about. And it's funny, when I was starting my company, because we were together after college, she used to say to me like, "What do you do? What is it that you do all day? Like, what are you doing all day?" And I say that to people all the time when they're bootstrapping. I'm just like, I don't know, if you wake up at 9 o'clock, which is late, and you go to bed at 9 o'clock, which is early, that's still 12 hours every single day. And when you're by yourself building a company with no one who's really holding you accountable, it's just very easy to let the time and the days go by. And I think that like having a business partner, even if he wasn't intimately involved in the day-to-day operations, just to like be talking and being accountable to. And now it's my wife. And I think that part of what I love about what Thrive is building is that like, if you are building by yourself, it gives you a place to go bounce ideas off of. And like my business partner, he's kind of like a crazy person. Like I love him. He's my best friend in the world, but like he's a crazy person. And like he has ideas that are just like not feasible. I don't know what else to say about them. But like 15% of the idea is probably doable. And just that 15% of those ideas is sometimes a lot better off than we are. And to have me, who lives my life with both feet like firmly planted on the ground, to pull him back down and say, hey, look, like we can't do all that, but like this is what we could actually do and implement. Like that, having that kind of relationship is really helpful. And I think you can find that in Thrive. I think that WeWork, the initial idea of it was to create a space like that. I don't think that's how it's worked out. If you walk around a WeWork right now, it's like all large corporate offices that are pretty much taking satellite offices there. So that like didn't pan out, but I think that everybody needs to find that community that keeps them sane, sanity checks them, and just like helps them grow. So Eric, I think you're building something awesome. That was an unrequested plug. You didn't ask for it, but
I
it's
appreciate
why
it.
we're like happy to host them at our office here. This looks like a really boring office, and it is, but the back of our office is like an awesome bar and deck and hangout space. So if you're in Philadelphia, let's have lunch and hang out. Happy to have you over or whatever. But happy to like take questions, or I don't know if that's helpful at all, but that's my story. And there it is.
I'd love to kick off the question, Dan. One, thank you. It was awesome. I can vouch. We did like a kick-ass event in like Dallas a couple weeks ago, but the Moxie Pest Control office does not compare to the like rooftop deck. But my question, I follow Alex Lieberman, who built and sold Morning Brew, and he post selling Morning Brew for like a great amount of money was basically like, I've never felt more lost in my life. He's like, immediately after selling, I felt like, okay, I got to go do something else. He's like, I started like 3 or 4 companies that like I really wasn't that passionate about, didn't pan out. It was just kind of all over the place. And I think you see a lot of these startup founders that even go through small exits, and then like that is all they've known for 5 or 6 years is like wake up, to your comment, like super early all day, build. And you see a lot of people like either do or don't have like a hard time transitioning back into like what I do next. But I think it's interesting that like you basically went straight up, worked for Square versus like go build something. I'm just curious, like how you thought about that, if that was like always your intention, or if you like regret like not going back and immediately into a new company, or like, yeah, how you made that decision.
I was just like kind of bored at Square, and I think like through no fault of their own. I think like when I they needed somebody to stay on, my partner had zero interest, and we had 75, 80 restaurants that were clients of ours who needed help through the transition, and I sort of agreed to come and join them. And look, like I made what any reasonable person would consider to be a significant amount of money, but not enough to never work again. So for me, it was like I never even had the thought of like I'm just could go do nothing, right? It was always like, am I going to go build something else? Am I going to go work for somebody else? I mean, I'm theoretically an attorney on paper. I have no interest in ever practicing as an attorney. So, a lot of like my life is avoiding having to go be a lawyer. And I just, for me, it was never like, I don't know. I want to build, I feel like I'm scratching that itch with the tutoring business, which, now we've started, it's been almost over 4 years now since we've been doing that. And that's, by the way, that's a company that's grown into like, I don't know, it's going to do several $100,000 in top line revenue this year, right? Which is, and again, most of that goes right back out to the tutors because of the way that building that's structured. Similar with Mainline Delivery, our revenue is very high, but most of that money just goes right back to the restaurants. When you pay DoorDash $100, 70 of that goes to the restaurant. And by the way, like again, I mentioned this, but DoorDash is not a profitable company. They don't have a PE ratio, but they're not profitable. Uber only posted a positive PE ratio like within the last 2 years when they started going to like a subscription model. I think Uber One like kind of saved them, where they lock people into the model. This is a bad business model at scale, right? And that's sort of what's fascinating about food delivery is all these companies are trying to build the biggest food delivery, and when it all comes down to it, it all might work out that it's just not a profitable business because no one's proven that it is. And like we did it, but only because we were hyper local and very small and spent no money on marketing. So like it's a commoditized business. So as long as there's two in existence, you'll always find the cheaper one, which means they always have to beat each other up on price. Somebody asked what I enjoyed most about the business, and I think like we had honestly like and it's not even a good business lesson. We had like 200 drivers in our system when we sold the company, and like every single one of them would have rather been doing something with their life than delivering food. I'm pretty confident of that. And if not every single one of them, it was like 95% of them, right? Like, and so, but there was nowhere else that like they were able to make the kind of money that they were making. Like we had drivers that were making $50,000 or $60,000 a year who were working full time for us essentially. But we were, and some of them got stuck in that, right? Because like, where are you going to go from there? But it was a job that provided a stopgap for like, I don't know, 200 people at like a time in their life when like they needed the money to go build the next thing that they wanted to go do, right? They did it while they were in college. They did it while they were in high school. They did it after college for a year while they figured out what they wanted to do. And like, I'm still in touch with so many of those drivers who went on to do like amazing things and have built like awesome companies and like, those. So just to be able to build those relationships was amazing. And also like it turned me from, everybody said people are going to steal from you, and I said no, they're not. And then we hired a driver and he stole $10,000 in cash from us, like over the course of time, right? And like that to me was just like, it might have been like $5,000. I don't even know because our system sucked so much that by the time we caught him, we didn't even know how much money he had stolen from us, right? But that was like, that helped me grow up. I mean, because that never happened again. Like after that day, it would have been very difficult for someone to steal even a small amount of money. And then we just stopped taking cash altogether, and that problem like solved itself, right? But I think like the relationships that I was able to build with the rest, I still can walk into Sankey, who I haven't worked directly with in 8 years, and Kwok and Frank, the owner and the guy who run it, will walk up to me, sit us right away, and like give me a ton of free food that I don't ask for or want, right? And like it's just to build those relationships with people like that who are mainstays of the community I grew up in is something that like can never take away, and I'll have forever. And so that was like my favorite part about building it, I think.
Meredith asked if you could go back and do anything differently, what would you change?
Um, we should have gone and tried to raise money a lot earlier, right? Like if you look at what our business was and what DoorDash is, they're the same thing at scale, right? Like there was somebody, like, just like I looked at dining in and all these other dinosaurs of companies that were still printing menu books and said, like, I can do this better. Like, the guys from DoorDash looked around at companies like mine and said, why isn't one company doing this for everybody all over the country? And we have a path to do that, right? So, like, if I have any regrets, I would say, like, it's not having that vision. But again, like, I'm not so sure that I'm cut out for that vision. Like, the companies that I've been able to grow, which I've done 2 of them now, or 3 if you include my real estate, have not been done by taking over the world at once. They've been done by incrementally growing over a little bit of time.
So my question's actually like kind of the counterpoint to that answer, Dan. So, as someone who worked in this kind of race to the bottom, no chance at profitability for delivery companies at scale race, you mentioned you wish maybe you had that vision. My question for you is actually like, was there someone who taught you that like, or who was the influence on you that said like just grind it out, we don't need technology, we don't need enterprise value, like we can do this, we can build it 0 to 1, and let's, in your words, the downside is waking up one day and saying we tried. Like that's so far from what I experienced in this race, and the opposite of what you suggest about wishing you had that vision. So like at what point did you appreciate that approach, and did someone teach you that, or was that just kind of who you are?
I think it's just who I am. Like, I don't know if I have like the risk profile to take on like tens of millions of dollars of somebody else's money in a business that I'm not like confident can turn profitable. Like, if your goal is to go public before the world figures out that you can't make money, that seems like a terrifying way to run your life, right? Like, and some people get there and most don't. Most realize that, like, oh shit, there's actually nothing under the hood here, and like it doesn't work out, right? That's kind of what happened with WeWork, right? Where like they just, it's all about timing. Like, DoorDash was able to go public at a time when like the world was going crazy with these IPOs, and like WeWork wasn't. And like it wasn't necessarily a function of how sound their business models were. It was like a change in timing of the world. And I don't know, like that to me is a terrible way to run it. And like if you break down what a food delivery company is, it just shouldn't be that expensive. Like the product is basic, right? Like you can build it on Shopify now, most likely. Like it's a simple menu. You have to take the order. You have to get the order to the restaurant somehow, whether that's through an iPad. By the way, we were until like 2012 or 2013 faxing orders to a lot of restaurants, right? Where it was an e-fax. We didn't have a fax machine, to be clear, but like we would send an email and they had a fax machine in their office, in their restaurant, where a physical order would print out, right? And we used that for a pathetically long time because it worked. Like you have to take the order, you have to get the order to the restaurant. You have to have a driver, you have to dispatch the driver to the restaurant, and they have to take the order. Like the concept is not that complicated. The problem is like when what we were able to do in our market is essentially elbow out all the competition to give ourselves time to grow. And the other companies, they like Uber and DoorDash, forget the eats part because it makes it a little complicated with menus, but just think about the passenger side of Uber and Lyft. It takes 12 seconds to figure out which one's cheaper, right? So like for me, where the service is commoditized, Uber could give me 365 days of free rides, and on day 366, I will open Uber and Lyft and choose the cheaper one, right? Like there's literally nothing that these companies can do to buy my loyalty except just be the cheapest option every time. They're trying to change that with like the DoorDash Dash Pass and Uber One and all that stuff to lock people into a system. But the truth is, if there's 2 players and they're both functionally the same in terms of quality, you just always have to be the cheapest. So like where these companies lose is in a race to the bottom on their fees, even though everyone still thinks they're too expensive. And also their marketing costs are just like through the freaking roof. Like it's the marketing that kills these companies. Like if you stripped their entire marketing budget out of their bottom line, my guess is a lot of these numbers would look a lot different, but you can't do that because they always have to be front of mind. So like for us, where we could strip, because we were so mom and pop, we could strip the company down to like what you really needed, which was a website that you paid for once. The server costs are almost nothing. You need 1 or 2. We could dispatch 500 orders in a day with 2 people in the office and a third for the 2 busiest hours, right? Like the company itself and all these big companies have they've replaced those people with automated dispatch systems, which are way more advanced than what was available off the shelf when we did it. But like, I think because we weren't doing it at scale, to answer your question the roundabout way, we were able to just break the business down to what it truly needed to operate where we were operating without worrying too much about growth. And that's how you can make a company like it's profitable.
And that got you free food at Sankey whenever through those relationships, and I'll eat those soup dumplings with you whenever you'd like.
It's unbelievable. That place is unbelievable, and we'll meet there. Happy to meet there for lunch. But yeah, I just think it's one of those weird companies that reverse scales because it's not truly a tech company. It's like if you wanted to scale an HVAC company to take over the country, you would have to go around and find qualified HVAC service providers in every single market all over the country at once. That either will take forever or it will be really expensive. It can't be one, that's it. Like if you want to do that quickly, you just have to burn a ton of cash, and that's what DoorDash did. And I think that by the time it was probably just again a function of timing. By the time I graduated from law school and I turned my head and I said, "Holy shit, we can blow this out of the water," like we were just too late.
You have a question in the chat, Dan. Is there anything you did for growth/visibility in the early days that you would describe as not being worth the time put into it?
Oh, we did tons of stuff that wasn't worth it. If you go on YouTube and you search Mainline Delivery, you'll find a really fun animated 30-second commercial. We ran that commercial like on TV a bunch of times because we thought it was cool. I have no idea if anybody else saw it, but I saw it, so that was fun. Turns out it's not that expensive to run commercials on like weird hours on weird channels. And even like during regular season Phillies games, it might be like $12 to show it for like a random 30-second spot because they have to put some aside for local ones. But we ran commercials. We flew that sign in Margate. Again, I don't know if that mattered to anyone nearly as much as like Cookie from Stephen Cookie just being like, we're delivering now. Like that's what people care about, right? They care about the quality of the restaurant. So it's like, that's what they care about. There's a funny picture of me and my like business partner dressed up for like a Halloween parade. Like I'm a taco and he's a hamburger. We like went and handed out business cards to people. We die cut thousands of these like business cards that we called like business cars that were our like blue car logo shape. And they were all like free delivery fee, and just we'd give them out to people like candy everywhere, and we'd get some back. And but these are all the thing that like drives me insane about marketing is like so much of it is just there's just even if it worked, how are you gonna know? Like business went up, okay, that's great. I did 8 things and business went up. Had I done none of those 8 things, I don't know what business would have done. Had I did 5 of those, like I just it drives me nuts. And I'm not saying marketing is not important. It's my weird way of saying marketing is like the most important thing, right? Because like when I started the company, people would say like, how are people going to find out about this? And my response was like, what are you talking about? This is the greatest idea of all time. Everyone's going to find out about it. And that's just not true. Like people need to be told about good ideas repeatedly by people they know and trust. And I just like, for us, the answer might have been like, we were just able to survive for long enough that people figured it out. And I don't, but yeah, spent like tons of, we had like, during the early days, we had nothing to do. We were trying to sign restaurants. We printed out flyers and put them in people's mailboxes. I just like, I don't think marketing people should be ashamed. I just think it's hard. I do. I just think it's really hard. And the people who are good at it, like, and even like the people who make these, like the Dollar Shave Club video, I think is just like the best marketing done ever, right? Like a guy in one take in a warehouse, it costs nothing, right? But like, and my guess is it wasn't the first time he tried something like that. It was just the one that worked. But like, I don't know, tons of things like that I think are good ideas.
Actually, the story behind the Dollar Shave Club is that it was not cheap at all. It's done by a very famous agency. It's meant to look like that. Yeah.
I think it was Brown's. I think it was like Mark Brownstein.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. No, it's a very famous video and it costs a lot.
Oh, well, well, you know what? He got me to tell all of you that it cost nothing. So then it worked.
Exactly. Yeah.
It did it. It had its intended purpose of me giving you misinformation. So sorry.
Yeah, I know. And it's self-shame. I am ashamed of what I do.
No, it's like that company only that 2-minute video changed that guy's life, right? Like in the most, I mean, that's the, beyond that, but yeah.
Something you said earlier, which I laughed at because like, I remember us like walking, looking for a place for Thrive to work in Philly, and you and I were talking about like what the fuck do people do all day? Like there are these people online and they're like, I'm really frustrated, I'm not growing. Your comment like you're waking up at 9 and going to bed at like 8 p.m. and like I don't know what you're doing in this like 12-hour period. Like I don't know, hearing like you talk about like you and your co-founder's relationship getting this off the ground, it sounded like just like very scrappy, willing to like do a lot of different things until something like finally stuck. Like, what do you have? What advice do you have to people that are in this like first year and they just feel like nothing they're doing is like working, but like they need to either like close a customer or move on, like kind of in that situation?
Well, I think that ideas are cheap and a lot of people have bad ideas. So I think for some people out there, like I just not so sure that you're solving a problem that the world will pay to have solved, right? So I think like idea value, like validation is important. And the day that I had idea validation for mainline delivery is we delivered to a guy early on, and he looked me in the eye and he said, "I have everything in the world but time." And that's when I knew that we were in the right market for doing what we were doing, right? Because like a guy who would just hand my driver a $40 tip on $100 worth of food that he's now paying like $170 for doesn't care because he's not getting in his car and driving to it, right? And like I think that you've got to like early on before you sink too many years of your life into something, like make sure that you're solving a problem that people are willing to pay for. And like if you can get past that threshold, like I think you're working with something. But like if you're doing a good job for somebody, that person probably knows other people who are in a similar situation who would also pay for you to do that thing. And I think like there's a whole like theory of the like I'm not okay, you're okay kind of thing where like, and it's you can look it up. It's not really like begging. It's basically saying like I could use help. You seem like the kind of person who can provide help. Will you provide help? Right? And most people, when put in a position like that, I do it all the time. It's how I end up hosting so many of these stupid events here, right? Because people come to me and they're like, "Can you host an event here?" And I'm like, "Well, it costs me nothing except for 3 hours of my time." And I'm like, "They need help, and I can offer the help. It's not that big of a deal. Of course, I'm going to do that, right?" And like, you know, yeah. But for years it was good. I was happy to do yours, Eric. But like going and talking to the customers the few customers that you do have are willing to pay, and saying like, if you're a service-based industry, like, can you tell your friends about me? Or like, what would you do if you were me? Like, ask the people who like, if you have a company that nobody has told you is a good idea, you probably don't have a good idea, right? And if you do have people who are telling you do have a good idea, ask them more questions. Like, talk to the people who believe in you already, right? And like, that's how. By the way, the way that we got a lot of our like investor meetings were like, we got random emails from people who like lived in Gladwin and Villanova who were just like, you don't know who I am, but I have a lot of money and I use your company twice a day, right? And we would end up in a room with them in their giant house discussing an investment in mainline delivery all of a sudden, right? And it was just like they were customers that turned into possible investors. And every single one of them at the end of the day was like, I'm not investing in this. And we're still in touch with all those people, right? Because like why they didn't want to invest in the company made perfect sense to me, but it was like we were growing relationships out of ones that we already had. So I think like if there's people who think you're doing a good job, like lean on them about it. I do that in real estate all the time. I call my own clients and I'm like, hey, who else do you know who needs work? I did a good job for you. Like, my target client customer is a CFO of a company. Guess who they know? Other CFOs of companies. So like, that's how I get most of my business now. People who need tutoring, guess what all their friends have? Kids with the same age who also need tutoring. It's where all of our tutoring clients come from, right? You find one, all of a sudden you've got 5 clients because they tell their friends, we just hired this tutor doing a great job. And their friend says, oh, my kid needs tutoring. And now we have 2 clients, and to reinforce that on every single invoice that we send to one of our tutoring clients, it says on the bottom, somebody needs tutoring service, we'll send you a $25 Amazon gift card when somebody else completes their first session, right? And that essentially wipes out all of our profit from the first session that person takes plus a little bit more. But like, who cares? What's a new client worth to you? So going back to the well of people who already think you're doing a good job in every way possible, and that goes, there's ways to do that you're not even thinking about. I was worried I was going to have nothing to say after like 25 minutes, Eric. I'm glad we made it 50 minutes.
Yeah. Well,
I talk very fast when I get excited, so sometimes it goes by quickly.
I like asked Dan to do this like a month or so ago. He's like, no deck, I'm in. And then yesterday I was like, you all good for tomorrow? Like reminder, no deck. He's like, that's great because there's no deck.
There's no deck. Oh, one more like last unsolicited piece of advice. Get yourself a whiteboard. I like really believe in writing down accomplishments, even when they're small, and having them to stare at all the time. And a digital dashboard is cool and great. And like we built a digital dashboard for Mainline Delivery. My dad had to log in. He loved like see how many orders we were doing every day. But like the one that I cared about was the one in our office that we were like writing our daily records on every day. And when we sold the company, my partner took it. His wife like redrew everything in permanent marker, and he like framed it, and it's hanging in his new office. And it's like an awesome thing for us to like look back at and talk about and like laugh about and have a drink over. But also like while we were doing it, like that's what we were trying to increase that daily revenue number, trying to increase that daily order count, and just like having a constant reminder that you're physically writing down. I think is meaningful and matters. And so no matter what kind of like digital dashboard you're using, like write something down and look at it every day and try to beat those numbers.
I just want to say, like, actual example of that. Like, I used to not agree with that slash like not understand. I think just because like I grew up around so much technology, and the agency I went and worked at, like my second day in sales there, I like told our boss that like we had like TVs everywhere with like Monday.com dashboard of like the intro calls and everything. And we like weren't using them for the sales team. And I was like, this is fucking stupid. Why when Drew books a meeting, does it not just like notify on there? And he's like, you haven't like worked here more than 2 days, so chill. But he's at the end of the day, he's like, you'll watch this in the first couple weeks you're here, like Drew will get excited like as we walk over to this whiteboard at the end of the day, like writing up the calls he booked and like erasing the 40K deal he closed. Like people need, like it feels cool for him. He like looks forward to that part of the day versus like he's working in another room. He didn't see it get erased off the dashboard, and like people don't know it happens. He's like forcing to write it on the board and force the room to clap for him. Like it's a cool moment. And I've just become a big believer in like writing shit down and writing things down that you say you want to do and like promise to do. And yeah,
If
agreed.
you've ever completed a task, realizing you never added it to your to-do list, and then added it just so you could cross it off, like you know exactly what I'm talking about. In terms of like the physical response of just there's something satisfying about it.
I even do that with my shopping list. If I'm like walking through, I'm like trying to validate why I like
Add it
just
on there. Yeah, I think it's
60%
helpful. I like very happy to not be in the food delivery industry anymore. But again, like similar to the franchise thing, like you don't have to just see a business opportunity. It doesn't have to be something you're passionate about. It could be like I would be a customer of this company. Why doesn't it exist? I'm building it.
sick. We'll ask one more time. Anybody have any last questions or comments for Dan? Once, twice. Cool. Well, dude, thanks for coming on and talking to the group. I think you have like a very, I'll call like raw and real story of entrepreneurship that is like not sugar-coated, but like very down to the detail of like what it takes to succeed. So thank you for coming on and sharing it with people. I'll send a copy of the recording to you. So you have it. There's a great roast in there of DoorDash I'd love to clip you talking about them not being profitable. So maybe we'll use that on social media or something. But man, seriously, thank you for doing this. Super motivating and inspiring, and like a great example of bootstrapping a company. Like there's not one better. So
Yeah, if you guys are in the Philadelphia area and want to grab lunch or coffee or a drink, I also might get into playing a lot more guitar and drums if anyone wants to play some music together, and can do a tour of the main line. But thanks for having me. This is a blast. I love it.
cool. Cheers, man. Thanks everybody for jumping on. We'll shoot the recording out this week. Send it to you, Dan, as well. But yeah, thanks everybody.
Awesome.
Cheers.
Thanks, Dan. Appreciate it, man.
You guys have a good one.
Take care.